Hello, my name is April Werle. I'm a mixed Filipino-American painter born and raised in Montana, and I'm so excited to be here. I create narrative paintings that draw from memories and experiences of navigating cultural heritage, mixed race identity, family, and belonging, and I'm just realizing I have a clicker in my pocket that I'll made. I'm particularly interested in how culture is passed down through generations in the Filipino diaspora, and how culture is shared in multicultural families and communities. I'm so honored to be here tonight and talk about the hyphenated American experience with you, whether you are a first, second, third generation Asian immigrant, if you're a mixed race individual, or if you're here simply to learn about Asian multiculturalism. I'm excited to talk to you about embracing multicultural identity. I'm going to share a little story with you, but first I want to go over a little vocabulary so that we are all on the same page because these terms have evolved over time. A first-generation American or a first-generation immigrant is a person born in a foreign country who has immigrated to another country, usually with the intention of establishing permanent residence. A 1.5 generation immigrant is a person who immigrated to a new country as a child or adolescent and spent their formative years in the new country, blending aspects of their home culture with the culture of their new country. A second generation immigrant is an individual born and raised in the United States who has at least one foreign-born parent. And a third generation American is the third generation of a family living in a particular country, typically born to parents who were themselves born in that country, but whose parents immigrated from another country. And diaspora is the dispersion or spread of a people from their original homeland. A hyphenated American is an American citizen who can trace their ancestry back to another country and often identifies with that heritage. Multiculturalism refers to the coexistence of diverse cultural communities within a defined geographic area characterized by mutual respect, equality, and harmony. And multicultural identity encompasses the diverse cultural perspectives, values, and practices that shape an individual's sense of self, reflecting their connections to multiple cultural communities. Okay, so the story begins in 2020. I think we can all remember where we were in quarantine. I'd only started seeing my partner a couple months before COVID, and quarantine had us quickly committed. I moved into his home so we could continue to date. Disclaimer, it went pretty well because 4 years later, we're still together and now have a cat named Mochi. There's my cat. But one day early in our relationship, I had dropped my rose gold midi ring on the brown carpet in our bedroom. My mother says I can't find a thing even if it's in front of my face. And this is true. I'm pretty sure it's actually a condition. But I called my partner in to help me find my ring. We were both on our hands and knees looking when he found it. I turned to look at him and he had one knee propped up as he presented my ring to me. We both giggled. Later that day, I was reflecting on the seriousness of our relationship, and I noticed that I had been nesting. I had painted multiple rooms in our house and I had picked out all of our decor. I had put a lot of sweat equity into this home, and more shockingly, my partner loved it. I was realizing this is the first time I had been in a relationship that was heading towards long-term commitment. It was in this realization that I had another realization. I am in a multicultural relationship. How would we raise our potential future children? I began thinking about my own childhood growing up mixed race and all the complexities and struggles that came with that. And I began thinking about how it would look to raise my children as not mixed, but as strictly white. The thought of that filled me with immense sadness. I wouldn't want to raise children that didn't understand and identify with the culture of my family. I realized that if I was going to have children that are more mixed than me, then I would need to begin learning some skills. I would need to confront my own insecurities on my cultural identity before I could teach a child how to navigate their own. At 25, I began relearning my mother's language. I began learning how to cook my favorite childhood meals, and I began learning Filipino and Filipino-American history. And most significantly, I began using my art practice as a tool to reconnect with my cultural heritage. In 2020, I had my first solo exhibition, Mga Hunghung sa Diwata, Whispers of Spirits, at the Holter Museum in Helena. When I signed the exhibition contract a year before, I was just beginning my journey of reconnecting with my cultural heritage, and knew this exhibition was an opportunity to support this exploration. I decided I wanted to focus on something really authentic to my childhood as a place to start. Something that really stuck out in my childhood memories that really formed my experience of the world was Filipino folklore. Haunted family stories of Filipino creatures like duende, capre, witches, ghosts, and other creatures were how I got to know my family's history and got to know my family members in the Philippines. And when I went to the Philippines at 15, I had my own haunted experiences. In this exhibition, I created paintings that reimagined both my own experiences with the supernatural and family folklore that had been passed down to me. In addition to these, I depicted deities and creation stories from my mother's province. Through the process of researching Filipino folklore and mythology, I learned a significant amount of pre-colonial to Philippine history, what my ancestors believed before colonization, how their beliefs evolved through colonization, and how folklore informs the lives of Filipinos today. Simultaneously, in the process of making this work, I was looking for a Filipino community in my local area and in virtual spaces. During this time, I was learning how to identify as Filipino to new people. I'd realized that I had relied on my mother's identity, and now as an adult, she wasn't around me all of the time to justify my belonging within community. Instead of saying, my mom is Filipino to new people, I was learning to say, I am Filipino. Although I was overwhelmingly accepted into Filipino spaces as Filipino, the more people I met, the more I realized that not all Filipinos will see mixed people or American-born Filipinos as authentically Filipino. This realization inspired my next solo exhibition. Last year in 2023, I had my second solo show, Halo Halo the Mixed Children, which opened at Zootown Arts Community Center in Missoula. If you don't already know, Halo Halo is a Filipino dessert and is a cute way to refer to Filipinos of mixed ancestry. After finishing my first show and expanding to more Filipino communities, I realized that I wanted to focus on my specific perspective of the Filipino diaspora. As I was entering more and more spaces, sharing stories of my Filipino experiences, I was terrified of encountering gatekeepers. Just as Asians are not a monolith, Filipinos are not a monolith. And I wanted to make sure that I was telling stories clearly through the perspective of being mixed race. In Mga Hunghung sa Diwata, Whispers of Spirits, I was learning to celebrate identifying as Filipino again. In Halo Halo, the Mixed Children, I was beginning to tackle what being mixed means. As a way to begin this, I created a series of paintings inspired by real quotes that I had thought or said aloud. Each quote reflects an experience related to my cultural heritage. For example, "Food tastes better this way" was a quote from one of my first memories with my mother and my little sister. We were eating broccoli, or as we like to say, little trees dipped in soy sauce with rice, and I remember we were pleading for my mom to feed us with her hands instead of using our own hands, because for some reason, food just tasted better that way. Or another piece, "I belong to my family." "I belong to my family" was an affirmation I kept telling myself over and over on my most recent trip to the Philippines. 6 to 7 years passed between my most recent visits to the Philippines. Between those times, I lost both of my grandparents and I lost a cousin. A huge portion of my family has also migrated, becoming overseas workers in Dubai. My family still in the Philippines are primarily my little cousins who were babies the last time I saw them. I told myself, I belong to my family in moments that I felt like a stranger. "Where Are You From is a painting that I don't think I need to explain to anyone here. And I started looking in the mirror and only seeing a white person is a painting based on a moment I had shortly after I decided I needed to reconnect with my cultural heritage. At that moment, I was looking in the mirror one morning sobbing because I realized I learned to see past my dark hair, my almost black eyes, my moles, my big lips, my skin. I'd learned to see past my Filipino heritage and to only see a white person. Through creating this exhibition, I learned that I'd been letting others dictate my cultural identity. I'd used my mother's identity as a crutch to justify my own Filipino identity. Then I learned to listen to others when they said I didn't act Filipino, or that I wasn't Filipino enough, so therefore I was white. What I learned from creating this exhibition is that I don't need others to justify my Filipino identity. Simply being me is acting like a Filipino, because I am Filipino, and I am a product of Filipino history, and I'm a product of my Filipino mother. That year on my trip back to the Philippines, I also learned the importance of calling myself specifically Filipino American. I realized putting the two words together was a magic trick. When people asked me, "Where are you from?" I began saying, "I'm Philam," or "I'm Filipino American." By adding the American part, I was happily surprised to realize that this made the question stop. In September last year, I began working on my next exhibition, Secret Life of a Multicultural Couple, which opened last week at Bell Projects in Denver. I realized that Halo Halo, the mixed children, was just touching the surface of what I wanted to explore with being mixed race. I also realized that because I don't need others to justify my cultural identity, that this actually made me feel empowered to bring others into my culture. In Secret Life of a Multicultural Couple, I wanted to create a show that explored how the culture shared by mixed race couples evolved quietly behind closed doors. The show had some firsts in it. It was the first time that I used someone else's hands in my work. My partner really loved modeling. And it was the first time sharing family stories, including someone that isn't used to me sharing their story. So I knew that I needed to approach this exhibition with care. At first, I began tiptoeing with the funny and tender moments of being in a multicultural relationship because I knew my partner would feel comfortable with that. But as I began structuring the paintings and mini stories that would create the larger story of the exhibition, it felt flat. And it felt inauthentic to leave the struggles out of the conversation. I decided to approach my partner, who as my hand model knew precisely what I was working on, and asked if it was okay if I shared the moments of conflict as well. Part of what was comfortable about sharing these conflicts is that they're not unique to us. They are conflicts that I've had in past relationships, and they are conflicts that many of my friends have encountered in their mixed relationships. So I began this exhibition with foaming moments like, use this to wash up, and come on in and pop your shoes off, which by the way was a very proud moment in my relationship when I heard my partner invite a friend into the house and say, come on in and pop your shoes off, because working to make this a shared responsibility had been difficult. And hearing him say this one day completely caught me off guard. It made me feel seen and appreciated. And then there are the paintings about the culture of food, from you have to eat vegetables to does this bother you, to I'll save the forks for you. And then came the moments of conflict, which by the way became humorous as I began painting hands arguing with each other. I'm not saying my culture is better than yours, but you're white too. And then I brought in tender moments like, this is how you measure rice, and we can send money home, which was inspired by a moment when I was having a complete meltdown in the Philippines. The family members that leave the Philippines are often the family breadwinners and often leave for the sole purpose of sending money home to support the family. On my most recent trip to the Philippines, I had moments of sitting with my cousins. We are all in our late 20s and they are now dads. We were drinking Red Horse and laughing. My partner was playing guitar, and I imagined our parents doing this in the exact same living room back when they were our age. And in those moments, I realized we are now our parents. As the child of an overseas family member, it is hard to understand your role in the family. Being poor here is nothing like being poor in the Philippines. And often I feel selfish that I chose my career path as an artist, when instead I could have chosen a secure job that makes a lot of money so I could help support my family. We Can Send Money Home was a moment where these thoughts and feelings came to a boil. And as I was sobbing in a hotel room from overwhelming and complex emotions, my partner was there witnessing it. I thought that this wasn't gonna happen, but as he was holding me, I realized that never before had I let someone see this part of my life. It was a moment of deeper cultural understanding, where I felt like my partner suddenly had a stronger understanding of me and what life is like for a Filipino family. What I learned from this exhibition is that there are conflicts in any and all relationships, and cultural struggles are normal for mixed-race couples. In fact, encountering moments of conflict, if navigated with love and grace, can result in stronger cultural understanding. In making this show, I also realized, to my surprise, that many of the moments I depicted mirrored my own internal struggles with mixed-race identity. These paintings could easily be interpreted as my Filipino self and my white self navigating culture together, which, by the way, is the inspiration for my next exhibition. Now, I'm not totally sure if we will have children someday because the term starving artist exists for a reason, but what I want to instill in our youth is we are the result of the people that came before us. We are not separate from history, are not separate from the history of our parents and grandparents. Instead of saying, my mother is Asian, say, I am Asian. And on top of that, add the American part, I am Asian American, and that this will stop the questions that come after. I want our youth to know that we cannot control how others perceive us, but we can learn and maintain skills to deepen our connections to our Asian heritage. It is never too late to learn language, to learn how to cook food, to learn folklore, mythology, and history. And most importantly, I want our youth to know our sense of belonging starts from within. The more we can balance and make peace with our Asian and American cultures, the more we can inspire others to embrace their own cultural identities and find harmony within themselves. Together, we create community, and community reaffirms our sense of belonging. Daghang salamat. Thank you so much, Asia, for having me tonight. The work that you're doing in bringing us all together is incredible. It is so needed, and I am beyond honored to be here today. Here is my contact information, my website, my email, and my Instagram. Please feel free to get in touch, and in fact, I would love to stay connected with y'all. Thank you.